thank you guys for joining me today. My name is Ian Schaefer and I'm here on behalf of UDA Technologies, and today we're going to be focusing on our on-cost estimating and on-point reporting and contract generation tools available through ConstructionSuite. Now, of course, yesterday we covered a few of these different topics pretty quickly in our overview webinar, and what I'd like to do today is kind of explore some of the getting started options and features for you guys so that we can get you off on the right foot when you're going through the estimating. To get started, again, a brief recap. What we're looking at here is the main screen for UDA Technologies' flagship product, ConstructionSuite. And on this main screen, or this Today page, you'll see a cost breakdown across all the different projects that we're working with here. You'll also have a lead pipeline that's going to be available. This is going to show us all the leads that we would have been entering in yesterday or from days past. And of course, we've got a change order summary and the project profitability. Today, what we're going to be focusing on here is, of course, the cost breakdown. This is going to be driven primarily from the estimate itself, and the project profitability, mostly because we're going to be generating our original contract sums, or those startup estimates, and some of the estimated values that go along with those as well. So you'll see this information becoming available to you guys here, and as we add in new projects, you'll see more and more information showing up on these graphs in the Today page so that we can get moving well. Now, as you're looking through the startup for a lot of these projects in ConstructionSuite, the most important thing that you guys can set up is a template for the estimates that you're going to be working on. Now, these estimate templates are going to be available over on the navigation panel on the left-hand side, and this is really the first part that I'd like you guys to focus on as you're getting started with estimates here in ConstructionSuite. So if you flip over to the estimating section, you'll see the information here. In looking at the estimates, all of you getting started with ConstructionSuite should have several tools available for you to help get started. You'll find these under the Estimating tab, and from the main dashboard you'll actually see a lot of them over on the bottom right hand corner of this section, with this showing us all the different templates that we've got available. Some of these templates are going to be estimating templates that are provided with the ConstructionSuite software, like the Commercial Master, Light Commercial Master, Residential and Remodeling templates as well. You'll see several of those available to you guys here. And all of these templates are easily customizable. If you guys want to open one up and take a look, you can right-click on the template and select the Edit option to open up one of these templates and take a look at some of the content that's going to be available to them. Now, this is your getting started point for most of the estimate templates. What I'd like you guys to do is go through and find one of these that fits the style of work that you do and edit it, open it up and edit it, and take a look at some of the structure for those. For this one, I'm going to use the Residential Master as our example. And we'll open this up and take a look, because we're going to focus on a little bit of the breakdown for the template and how you guys can make adjustments to them there. But just as you guys move through this, you'll start to see some of the structure and how the information is going to become available when it pushes over to some of the other tools that we're going to be using, like proposals, or tomorrow, as we explore this in more detail, QuickBooks integration. So the information that we're setting up here is going to be setting us up for success as we move forward too. This is one of the major reasons why I like to set this up as a starting point for everybody. Creating the estimate template is probably the most important thing that you can do for getting started. So as I mentioned, several different starting points for you guys here. If you click into the commercial section, there's the commercial master that you can open up. Light commercial, if you guys do tenant improvements or small commercial projects, you can open those up as well. Residential and remodeling, you can access those also. We also have a CSI 16 and 50 division format available to you. If you use these structures, great. Wonderful starting point for you here. For now, though, I'm going to focus on one of our recommended models, and that's the residential sample. So here it is. So again, right-click, edit the template, and it'll open up for you and look something like this. This is OnCost, and in OnCost, this is where we're going to be putting together a lot of the pricing information that we have for the estimates on each of our jobs. Now, the default layout and the information that we have available to you guys here is going to be structured, first of all, under the name column that we have over here on the left-hand side. So in the name column, we've got categories like planning and foundation, framing, and on this project totals page, which you can see which page we're on up here, from the project totals page, this is going to give you all of your category names in blue, and in the blue highlighted row, that is. The subcategory names are going to have blue text, and they're going to be underlined whenever you hover over them, indicating that it's a link to take you to that category sheet where you can expand out some of the detail for them as well. So from this page, we've got categories: planning, foundation, framing, subcategories like design services, permits, and lot costs. And this information is going to be expanded to a little bit more detail if you click on one of these subcategories, where you can then see the itemized breakdown within the subcategory. So here, for example, lot costs, we've got lot and property costs, and then in other costs, under permits, which might become a little bit more pertinent for you guys, we have building permits, zoning permits, inspection fees, impact fees, and things like that here as well. So again, now on the planning category sheet, we've got subcategory design services, and we've got line items underneath it. Next subcategory is permits, and line items underneath this one as well. And you get the summary view when you go back to the project totals page, which actually has a little tab down here on the bottom. There's a tab for each category sheet that you can work with along the bottom as well, but project totals is going to be the easiest for the summary page that we need to take a look at first and foremost. Now, in addition to the category and subcategory names that we're going to be working with here in the estimate and OnCost, you'll also have some notes which are going to be available to your left. To the left of this item, or the subcategories and categories, if you click into this small cell, it'll open up the general notes, bid notes, and field notes to give you a little bit more space to put in better detail for these. Now, the general notes in particular, I'm a huge fan of putting in the specifications that we're going to be doing for most of our jobs in this particular section. If for a typical job we include something like 3 sets of plans with our design services, this might be a wonderful place to go ahead and include that as part of the general notes, as just some of our boilerplate information. So, and again, I can include this because I know that this is going to be standard for most of our projects. For those of you that are working on really unique projects, maybe there's not as much information that you would put into the notes. For those of you who work on development projects, or if you guys control subdivisions and you typically have 4 or 5 plans that you'll build, there's a strong chance that you'll be able to fill in almost all of this information right from the get-go. Now, of course, we're looking at the general notes now, and there's 3 types of notes that I've mentioned: general, bid notes, and field notes. General notes are typically the ones that we will include in the reports for our clients, or just general information that we want to keep in the job site binder, perhaps. The bid notes would typically be where you would include information from subcontractor bids, or part numbers, order numbers, or anything like that for the materials that you're going to be using from vendors or suppliers. And the field notes will typically include most of the information that needs to go into any of the field reports, like work orders and the like. Field notes will also sync over to the schedule eventually, so keep that in mind as a primary piece there. That information is going to be translated over pretty easily. Now, in addition to the notes section, to the right of our name column, we've got the description column coming up next. Description, much like the description column in QuickBooks, is your way to add a little bit more flavor to the items that we're working with here in ConstructionSuite. So here in Design Services, if we needed to add a little bit more detail to it, you can always enter into the description column and type in some of the additional text. You'll tend to use this a little bit more frequently as we're going through the subcategories to add the information in for those subcategories, especially if you guys are doing very general work. And you don't want to get into the specific nitty-gritty detail for what's going to be included. So maybe you've got a subcontractor that's doing all the electrical work. You could put in a description of what he's going to be working with there, but it doesn't matter what the bits and pieces are, so you don't have to work with that. Now, the important part on this description column still gets used in some of the reports that we're going to be working with in ConstructionSuite. It will also be available as you sync the details over to the schedule and push the information into QuickBooks as well. So if you use QuickBooks right now, and you guys typically like to do a little bit of cost coding to your item names, or the category and subcategory names are going to be fairly consistent from job to job, you can use the description column to add a little bit more distinct information as you move through those. So keep that in mind as well. Now, the majority of the rest of the information throughout the columns past the description are going to be much more heavily used as we step into a category sheet, so we'll take a look at that here in a moment. But some of these columns are going to be things like the type, which in ConstructionSuite is either going to be an estimate, an allowance, or an option. Big difference between them, of course, being your estimated costs would be flagged as an estimate subcategory. The allowances are going to be things like you might include allowances for kitchen appliances or plumbing fixtures. Options, of course, are things that are not going to be included in the project totals as you're working through this. So perhaps it could be upgrade packages that you guys might want to include. Our default is to use standard appliances for the kitchen. If you want to go with the mid-level appliances instead, that's going to be one option. The top-level brands for those kitchen appliances might be a second option. So you'd have one subcategory marked as estimated, and then two subcategories that would be options that don't contribute to the cost of the job. So those will be available to you guys there. Next, as you go into the method column, these will typically be either detailed or lump sum. Detailed means you're itemizing everything in there. You're going to break it out to the total number of sticks and bricks that you need for that subcategory. Lump sum means you're just buying it as part of a package, or perhaps it's a subcontractor bid, again for that subcategory. Classification is something we actually took a look at from that main dashboard in ConstructionSuite. There are 5 typical classifications to go with everything here in ConstructionSuite, and those are materials, labor, subcontractor, equipment, and other. And you saw the classification breakdown earlier. There's also going to be a classification breakdown over here to your right as well, where it'll actually break out those costs by classification to see if that distribution of costs looks reasonable. So you'll be able to go in and take a look at that as well. And the rest of the information for an estimate value or extended total, a total cost, our markups, and total price, these will all come from those category sheets. So let's actually go in and take a look at one of the category sheets now. Again, it's pretty easy to do. All you have to do is come over to and click on either a category or subcategory name here. And this will take you into the subcategory where you can start working on the details for those as well. Now, in this particular template that we're working on, you can see that we've got a little bit of information here for notes and descriptions. As you move across from here, we now have drop-down menus for the type where you can select a different setting for the subcategory. In the templates, though, that we're working on, we will only ever use the top 3, estimate, allowance, and option. Change order is something that's going to become available for you if you're using the Premier or Catalyst version of ConstructionSuite and above. And you'll only ever want to include change orders once the job has a signed contract. And it's typically for any adjustments that are made to that contract for your client. So that's where those come into play. For now, we're just using the top 3. Now, as you move over into the method column, again, this is either going to be detailed or lump sum. And what you'll see if you switch between these two options, detailed is giving me this itemized breakdown for the subcategory where I can put in a cost for plans and design services, and then another cost for engineering and site planning and so on. If we switch it to lump sum, I have one package price for design services, and you can put that in here under the cost column. So we could say this is going to be $5,000, perhaps, for our design services. Now, this is always going to be an either-or situation. You will never have a detailed cost and a lump sum for a single subcategory. And you'll see this if we click out of the cell. Now I have a lump sum value for this subcategory. If we switch back to detailed, the subcategory cost goes back to 0 because now we're breaking out the costs into its individual components instead. I want to know how much we're spending on engineering and how much we're spending on site planning and everything like that. Hopefully it will add up to about the same number, but if we're just getting one lump sum from a subcontractor or something like that, then we'll switch back to lump sum and go from here. Now again, this is all part of a template as well that we're looking at right now. So as you're going through the template, you'll typically want to factor in just your standard pricing information that you guys have for these. For example, if the subcontractor that you work with always charges $5,000 regardless of the size or scale of the job, then we can just set that up as our default cost. You'll see this coming into play a little bit more commonly as you guys get into things like foundation and framing, and you're starting to price out things like 2x4s or lumber in any fashion, setting up standard costs for flooring or anything like that. If you have your standard costs that you use for most of these items, go ahead and put in that pricing information ahead of time. If you don't, you can always leave the cost as 0 until you get to that stage in the estimate once you actually start the estimate for a project. So let's go ahead and 0 that out again, and we'll go from here. And of course, the main data entry columns that you're going to be working with then in ConstructionSuite as you're putting together your estimates are going to be the quantity. That's exactly like it sounds. Unit costs are going to be next, and then the units themselves. Now the unit column is going to be a fairly large list, a collection of units that you guys will have, and you can add to this and you can remove from it and everything like that. But by default, it's going to be populated with a lot of the items that are going to come to you through the RS Means cost books. RS Means has a huge sum of items that are going to be available to it, and most of those units are thrown in here to the units selection area, where you can come into and search for the type of unit you would like. A couple of different options there. Or you can just scroll through the list until you find the one that you would prefer to use. Once you do that, these three things are going to work in conjunction. The quantity, cost, and unit will work in conjunction to provide you with a total estimated value, or the extended cost for this, which you'll see in the estimate column. The extended cost, typically plus tax, will give you a total cost. This is how much you expect to pay for this particular line item. And then once you add to the total cost a line item markup, which, let's actually rearrange these two columns, this should provide for you a total price, which is what you're charging your client. So unit cost, extended cost, total cost, what you think you'll pay, total price, what you charge your client for this line item. Now, the reason that we have all three columns in here, of course, is there's going to be three different factors as you're looking into this. Your extended cost is assuming that the tax value is irrelevant. Taxing might not change based on your region or anything like that, but if you wanted to take this job and plug it into someplace else, you'll know that the extended cost is going to be how much you're expecting to pick up from the store, and then tax is going to be applied afterwards to give you that total cost. From here, the line item markup is typically used to add that cushion to any of these sections. And the easy way to add in a line item markup is just to click into the cell, and it'll give you the option to either put in a percentage here, or a fixed dollar amount, perhaps per unit that you guys are applying. And this might give you that little bit of wiggle room that you need. So we assume that it's going to be $5,000 for the design services if we include this on the job. But just to make sure that there isn't a price adjustment or anything like that we get hit with that's a surprise, maybe we'll add in an extra 10% and just set this up by default in the template. This just provides that little bit of flex room, and it increases the cost of just this one section. So in this one subcategory, I now have a 10% markup included with this as well. Beneath this, you could set it up for an individual line item if you wanted to set it differently. So if we wanted to increase the percentage markup for just the zoning permit, because they get a little crazy, we can include that here as well. We can put in something, let's say, reasonable, to increase just the cost of this one individual line item. Or if you ever try to enter in a line item markup for the top item in a subcategory, it'll ask you if you want to apply the same line item markup percentage or dollar amount to everything in there. So the idea being, if you've got a uniform markup that you want to apply to everything in the permits category, we can do it all at once just by entering it into the top line item and saying, yes, we want it to be for all the items. Now we can actually take this a step further if you'd like, and we can apply it to everything that fits a certain classification. So in this case, most of these subcategories and items are classified as other costs. And if we click into the estimating section, there's a place where we can set a classification markup here for anything that's flagged as another cost. So I could just say that I want to make this 15% across the board for everything in the entire estimate. I'm setting a default in this case as a markup for all of my other cost items, and there they go. This is extremely handy if you guys are going through and you're trying to factor in things like labor burden. Anything that you have set to the labor classification throughout the entire estimate, whether you're using the items or not, can have built in that labor burden markup percentage so that it's doing this by default. The calculation is already being included, and you don't have to try to remember every time whether or not you guys included your labor burden on a labor item. It just happens for you guys automatically. Saves that extra step. Now this is one of those things that I like to have set up for myself in the templates as well, so I highly recommend you guys do the same thing. And once again, setting those classification markups can be done under the Estimating tab, right here under Set Classification Markups. And when you set these, of course, put in the numbers that make sense for you, click OK, and it factors in throughout the template itself. Now in addition to this, we've got line item markups now There's also going to be a category at the end of your estimate called the company overhead margin category. So if we scroll to the very end of this, and you can just hit the jump to the end of the estimate button here, this will take you into the company overhead margin category where you can apply the total overhead cost as a percentage, your total profit margin, and your contingency reserve as well. So as you're going through and you're setting up your items and you're setting up your line item markups and you're setting up some of the percentages here, these are all going to factor together to create this one total price at the end of the estimate. And from this company overhead margin section, this is going to be either a percent markup, as in you're marking up your costs. If you're using a cost plus project or anything like that, you'll see these markups coming in from there. Or it's going to be a percent margin. Percent margin is a lot more common if you guys are working on fixed fee projects. It's also going to be what your CPAs or your accountants are typically referring to if they're talking about a gross profit percentage or profitability on your jobs. So if your accountant tells you that they want you to hit a 35% GP, then you should have a total of 35% available to you here. And that means that 35%, if you guys are using the percent margin calculation method, 35% of every contract that you sign will be set aside to cover your company's costs and your profit margin. The other 65% of every contract is going to be covering the cost of the contract itself. And that's where that breakup comes for most of these fixed fee projects and where you guys are coming from. For those of you doing cost plus projects, the difference is going to be from the percent of costs option, which is available to you guys here in the drop-down menu. This is going to take the total cost of the job itself, and it's just going to apply this percentage to that. So it'll say that the cost of the job is 100% of that cost, and then we're going to take 15% of that and give you a new 115% value, and so on. Now this becomes a little bit complicated as you guys are going through the numbers on this one, but again, the industry standard is percent margin for most of these projects that you guys are working with. And if in doubt, try both. The easy way to explain the difference between these two, though, is if you just go in and you set let's say $100,000 value for this job, and in order to get that, I need to zero out the percent markup here, and let's just say that this is $100,000. That's 10. We now have $100,000 for the project, and if you come to the company overhead margin, we can start to see how much the value is for a percent margin versus a percent of costs. And what you'll see in here, if you go through and you play with the percentage calculations, percent margin is always going to be pretty significantly more than percent of costs. So again, if in doubt, go with percent margin. The nice thing is, if your clients ask you to ever step it down a little bit, or they ask for a discount of some form, you can always just come in here and flip it to percent of costs, and that might give them the discount that they want. But again, the idea here is you're setting up the template, the estimating template, to have all of these percentages in there by default, so you don't have to remember to come in and apply your company overhead costs later, or your company margin or anything like that later. So again, go ahead and come into this and set your percentages right here, like so. Just type the percentage that you want to use and select the calculation method that you want as well, preferably percent margin if you're in doubt. So this will set up a lot of the information that you guys might need for the templates. And again, as you're going through one of these templates, like a remodeling master or a residential master or anything like that, make sure you take a look at the categories and subcategories here first. These are going to be what determines the structure for your template as you guys move forward. Now, the reason I draw your attention to this is we've talked about all the different columns that are going to be available to you guys, but you're always going to want to come into and make some changes to the template to add your company's personal flavor and your character to what goes into the estimates, or maybe you guys have specific brands that you want to use as well. So to actually edit some of the content that's going to be available to you in the template, the easy option is to just come into and right-click on one of the categories or subcategories. And from here, you can choose the rename option if you guys wanted to add in some cost codes perhaps to the name of the categories that you're working with. Or you can copy and paste some of these categories and subcategories around to reorder them in the estimate. You'll also be able to just move them up and down as needed as well. So if you guys wanted to shift them around a little bit because the order doesn't quite fit what you guys would like to do, by all means, go ahead, just right-click on the category or subcategory you would like to shift, and you can do so pretty easily. In addition, the templates that we offer for you in ConstructionSuite are designed to be pretty all-encompassing master templates that might show up for any given project that you guys work on. With that said, there's probably going to be some content in here that you may not need on a regular basis for your projects. For example, I have in the foundation category an area in here for site work, and then we start to break everything down into its individual components for footers labor and materials, foundation labor and materials, concrete slab labor and materials, and then a foundation miscellaneous. Now I think that the footers subcategories and foundation subcategories and the concrete slab, this is enough for me. We don't really need the foundation miscellaneous, so in this case we can also right-click on this subcategory and just delete it altogether. This is just going to remove the line from my estimate template so that I don't have to skip over it every time, and this just helps kind of clean up the template a little bit. Now in addition to this, we might find that there's going to be other sections that I'd like to add because we need to maybe expand out a different section in the job, and for that we can just scroll around in the estimate to an area that you need to expand something out a little bit and select either add subcategory or add category to create this new content. So if there's another category that you guys would like to work in, let's say that my site work is a little bit more elaborate than I make it seem here from the foundation category, I might want to just right-click and delete the site work subcategory and instead add an entirely new category here, and let's call this one site work instead. And then from here we can build in a few subcategories like site clearing perhaps. We can add another one, another subcategory here. Just click on the add subcategory link, and maybe this would be removal. Well, let's call it debris removal. Debris removal. And then so on. Maybe we've got site work miscellaneous. So you can set up some additional subcategories in here that fit into your preferred estimating style a little bit, and it's all through the use of the add category and add subcategory links that you'll have in there. If you click into one of these subcategories though, there's also going to be an add item link, and this is going to provide one of a couple of different functions depending on how you guys choose to have ConstructionSuite set up. Now, my default settings, which you can get to under the Tools menu, if you open up the Options section here, my default settings, whenever I click Add Item, would be to add in another item manually. This item is just giving me another blank space where I can put in the name of something that I'm going to be using. So for debris removal, maybe this is dumpsters. And perhaps we have other things in here like equipment costs and things like that as well. So we've got a dump truck and maybe a backhoe, things like that. And for these, as you're going through and you're adding in these new line items, you'll always want to make sure that you start to set up some of the additional content for them correctly as well. So these are predominantly equipment rental, so let's go ahead and flag these as equipment. And you'll notice that it does give me the option to include everything as equipment in this case. We can always go in and change them though as needed. But setting up these classifications just means that now my line item markup is going to apply by default. So again, automating a couple of these extra steps so that we don't have to necessarily remember as much. We're also going to have some of these rental fees per day or per week or something like that. So let's scroll around and set the units correctly. Oh, looks like I don't have the per week, do I? Negative. That's good. That means that we can come in here and add in a new unit as well. And let's set that to per week. And there you go. So again, you can always come into and adjust some of this information as part of the template. And in doing so, most of the information is going to be there and available to you guys ahead of time. Now, I did mention earlier that the default templates that we have available to you for estimating in ConstructionSuite tend to be a little bit larger or a little bit more all-expansive. And the reason that we do that is we're trying to make sure that in the estimates themselves, you don't overlook any section of the estimate as you're going through your next job. So with that in mind, we always recommend the same thing. Put in as much information as you can think that you might need on any job that you work on, because you can always skip these as you're going through the estimate and then hide them at a later date. And what I mean by this is, as you're going through and you're putting in some of your costs, and there's hotkeys in here, by the way, as well. So I'm going to tab through cells, or you can use the arrow keys to move up and down as well as you need to. But as you're going through and you're putting in some of your costs for these various different items that you guys have in ConstructionSuite, the $0 items that we don't necessarily use, we can just move past those and go to the next section. Let's say I want to put this one in as lump sum. And this site work miscellaneous is actually going to be subcontracted. And the people coming out here and doing some of the work for me are going to charge me $1,500. So there it is. That's some of the costs that we have here. And I've skipped this entire debris removal section because that's just going to be part and parcel with this site work miscellaneous subcontractor cost. So with that being the case, on the job that we'd be working on, these items don't get included. And I can come up to the View menu now and hide them. There's a button here for Hide Unused Sections. And this is just going to basically remove them from view and allow me to hide these sections so that I don't constantly have to look at them or scroll past them or anything like that. But we can always click on the option again to bring them back just in case something comes up. Like we've got a change order that we need to add in because there's additional site clearing that we're doing as the lot has expanded since the original estimate was created. These may come up a little bit after the fact, but again, there's always going to be the option to come into the View menu and just flip back and forth. We can hide these unused sections or unhide them as needed to build out the rest of the estimate that we're working on. Now, of course, this is still the template that we're working on. So let's clear out all the work that we've done so far for pricing information. Actually, we can just go ahead and remove the entire category there. And move on to the next section as well. So this is how you're going to go through and you're going to build out all of the estimate templates that you guys want to use. Again, same thing, just right click on the estimate template that you're working on and select Edit to edit the template and move on to the next one. As you go through from here, the templates are going to be available to you whenever you get into a project and start launching your estimate for the first time. So if you come from the estimates themselves, the estimating templates section, and go into your projects list, from here you'll see all the projects that we have active down in the lower portion, but I'd like to create a new project so that we can have a blank slate for creating a new estimate. So we'll click New Project, and it'll take us through the project wizard, which if you read through this, it's actually guiding us through step by step, creating all the content that we need for the job. So we'll give it a project name. I'll say that this is going to be a booth residence. I don't believe I have one of those in the system yet. And this I'll set as a single family residence for my colleague Kyle. Now from here, the information that you enter into the project wizard is all going to be used when we start to generate some of the reports based on this one, like proposals, item units reports, or classification reports. Also things for our vendors and suppliers for like materials lists or purchase orders so that they'll know where to deliver the information, the materials. So again, in this section, when you're setting up your projects, try to be as complete as possible so that you don't end up overlooking any of the important pieces of information and having to retype this when you go into some of your reports at a later date. All right, so project group. The project group and project status are used pretty heavily for some of our own reporting tools that you guys may be doing through ConstructionSuite. For example, we have the project status filtering options up here at the top, and these are the statuses that I have active at this particular point. So if we go into the project status selection area, you can pick which one of these you want to use. Now this is a pending project. We don't have a signed contract or anything like that, so I'm going to select the pending status. My project group in this case might be one of the subdivisions that we're working out of. So let's go with Baldwin Park, because that's going to show up for most of you guys as part of the sample content if you still have it. And then from here we can go on to the next page as well. Now let's pause for a moment. It looks like we actually have a couple of questions here. So one of these is, first question that I've got, when you get to the cost database, how do I know what the unit of measure is for the per unit, linear feet, square feet, cubic yards, what does it happen to be? There's another question after this, I think, but let's touch on that one first, because well, actually, tell you what, to the viewer that sent in that question and the follow-up question, let's hold for a moment until we get back into the estimate and start putting in some of the prices for those. I'll talk about those units as we get into them here in just a moment. So first, let's finish out this project wizard. In the project, we've got a scope of work that we can include. This is just a basic scope, by the way. So as you're putting this information together in the project, you want to keep this part simple. So it could just be like a new home using this particular floor plan or something like that. We'll have more detail that we can add to these in a little bit. Same for the special conditions, or in my case, these would typically be exclusions for the jobs as well. So we'll click Next, and then Finish, because I don't have any special dimensions that we need to use for this particular project. So here we are. So we've got the overview now for a blank project, and it's time to pick the estimating template that we want to use. So from here, you'll see that for all versions of ConstructionSuite, there's going to be a Create Estimate link available to you guys here. So in this case, I want to just click Create Estimate. All of them will lead you into the same area here, which is the Estimate Wizard. The Estimate Wizard is, again, a wonderful little guiding tool to take you through which template you want to use and make sure that you set up your taxes and everything like that correctly. So to begin with, I'm going to select a predefined estimate because we've already set up the estimate template that I want to use. So let's click Next. And from here, we actually get to scroll through and pick the template that we're going to be using. And you'll see several different options available to you guys in here as well. So if you work with these and you've got a couple of different estimating templates that you'd like, you want to create one, for example, for if you're a remodeler, maybe you've got master bathrooms that you work on and kitchens and maybe additions and garage conversions. These could all be individual templates where you could do a whole home remodel. Again, for some of the home builders that we have out there, if you guys have a few floor plans that you typically build over and over again, then maybe you set those up as templates. You could have a Henderson floor plan and a Jefferson floor plan and a Washington floor plan. So whatever those might be, you can include them here. You'll also see some of the other standard ones as well. So just for time's sake, I'm going to use the residential sample in this one. It's got some pricing information that'll help out in just a moment. Now again, from here, it's going to ask me to confirm the project that I'm going to be saving this into and make sure that the project information looks correct. And it does, so we'll click Next. And this is where we get to put in our taxes. So in this case, it breaks these costs out for me as one of the US users of ConstructionSuite to include a local materials tax, county tax, estate tax, or we can just put in one, as I would typically do. If your service tax is a little bit different, you can put in a different value for it here and go from there as well. Now these are going to be set by default in the estimate now that we're opening up this template. Wherever we have the materials tax type set, it's going to use this 8% value. Wherever we have the service tax type set, it'll use 12% instead. For those of you who are working in places like if you're in Canada or if you're in Australia, the sales tax options available to you here will be determined by the country that you set on your initial configuration. So you might have, if you're in Canada, it could be like HST, PST, and GST or something like that instead. But the same still applies. You just put in the percentage for that and then click Finish. I've also found that some of our users, like those out in New Mexico or Arizona, might have different percentage requirements or decimal requirements for their taxes. I think was it New Mexico, I think, specifically has a tax type of something like 8.5625 or something like that, which is where this additional option comes in to include more decimal places if you need them. So you can always set that up and then click Finish, and it will open up and save the estimate for you into the project that we're working on. And then from here, we can start getting into the specifics for this job. Now, the reason that I chose this particular estimating template, the residential sample, it's got some of the pricing information for me already outlined, And this could be information that we set up by default in the template so that I don't have to go in and re-enter the same numbers every single time we go through a job. So from here, just to revise the numbers that I have available, we can always click into the planning category and start from the top. If my design services costs looks good, then I can leave it as is and move down to the next one. If we needed to adjust any of the unit costs or anything like that, then we can always click into the quantity, cost, and unit fields from here and move on. But for now, we'll just keep working through. My permit costs look good, lot costs are also good, foundation is fine, and so on. So we could come over to the foundation category next and start looking at some of these costs. And let's say, just as an example, that we decide that we wanted to add some additional information into one of these sections. So our footers material isn't as comprehensive as we want it to be. We need to add some more materials to this. And again, we've got the two options for how you can do this. Now, I mentioned the first option, the easy option earlier, where you just click on the Add Item link and it'll insert one of those items manually. You'll also see that option available to you if you come up to and click on the Insert menu, where you can see an Insert Item Manually button right here in the middle. Now, just next to this, we have an Insert Item from Database, which is actually where that question from earlier was kind of leading us. So let's go ahead and click on this Insert Item from Database so that we can open up the items database and take a look at some of the content. So here we are. This is the items database available to you guys through ConstructionSuite. And depending on the version of ConstructionSuite that you guys use, you're going to have different cost books available to you by default. Most of these are going to be available through a cost book company called RS Means. RS Means provides North American pricing averages through their cost books, and this is one of the reasons why we have a multiplier available in the top right. But you can select one of a number of different cost books to use as your default cost book, and since we're working on a residential project, I'm going to click on the option here to select a cost book, and I want to select my residential cost data. Now this is going to load up the RS Means cost book for residential construction, and it's going to have in this particular cost book 16 different categories for the breakdown on where the items are going to be located. And if you use the main header, it'll actually show you all the different items that are available in this cost book. And this cost book contains over 10,000 items. I can't remember the specific number, but I don't expect you to either. But what you'll see in the cost book is an item name, 1x1 pine miscellaneous trim, the unit, in this case linear feet, and then it'll have a material quote of 32 cents per linear foot and a labor quote of 47 cents per linear foot. This is the pricing information that RS Means provides, and this is what they recommend. So if you're interested in using the RS Means cost books, this is where you'll come up with that pricing information. Now, as I mentioned, RS Means is North American pricing information, so you'll always want to apply the multiplier to get a little bit closer to your region. We're located in Auburn, so I'm going to first come down to and enter in the zip code for me here, which is 36830, and you'll actually notice that some of the pricing information is going to adjust based on my region, like labor costs are going to tank, as an example. So it went from 47 cents for the previous multiplier that we had down to 31 cents now. Material costs are approximately the same. But this is going to reflect that labor costs in Alabama are probably going to be a little bit less than labor costs elsewhere. So you'll see this information coming together for you here, and you'll also notice that next to each of the quotes that they give me. So here I've got 1x1 pine trim. I've got a 32-cent material quote for this. So if we select an area that we want to use this pine trim and click on the arrow next to it, it'll ask me how much of that particular material we want to insert. In this case, in linear feet. So you can just put in the value that you'd like to insert, and it'll plug that item in for you in line. There it is. Now again, the cost book is going to stay open and available to us, so if we navigate through to find an additional place in the cost book that we need to use items for, we're inserting more information, then you can click into a specific category perhaps that you guys are looking at, expand out some of the subcategories for here, and then click on one of the items that you guys would like to use from here. Or you can search for items as well, just in case you guys are looking for something. So I'm going to remove this pine trim as that's in the wrong place. But let's see if they have any anchor bolts here in the RS Means cost book. Now, first of all, I want to make sure that I'm searching the entire cost book. Let's just search for anchor bolts. Looks like I have several options. So again, same thing is going to apply. We've got several different options for what we're going to be using. Here's the unit that RS Means applies to each of these as well. And then of course they've got the material costs for what I should expect to pay based on a national average or a regional average or anything like that. So this is the material cost. The labor cost, by the way, is going to be a factor of the units as well. So this is how much I would expect to pay my laborers for each anchor bolt that they would be installing. So it should be 55 cents per bolt. And if you'd actually like to get a little bit more detail on what's going to be included with that, you can actually right-click on one of these items and select Edit Item. The notes associated with this tell you how many should be able to get installed by a single person in a single day, and then how many man-hours it takes to install a single unit from this as well. Once again, this is all built off of RS Means. If you guys like the RS Means cost book and you choose to use a lot of this information, it's a wonderful resource for coming up with rough pricing information for material costs and labor costs associated with this. It'll also take this a step further as well and show you the recommended crew for installing all of these things and how much you can expect to pay as an hourly average for those guys as well, prior to the multiplier being applied. So for us, bricklayers aren't $28 an hour, they're probably closer to about $20 an hour, which is why my labor cost would be lower than it may be for you, for when you guys apply your own regional multipliers. So take a look at that. Now we've got a couple of different comments coming in with regard to RS Means. The first one here is that the pricing information always seems to be a little bit off, either high or low, depending on what you guys are looking at. And that can happen. Again, RS Means is based off of national averages, so you're talking about averaging the cost for this 1/2-inch diameter by 12-inch long anchor bolt across all of the United States and Canada. So with that being the case, since you're averaging the cost and then you're trying to figure out how much it's going to be for your area, prices might be a little bit off sometimes. And to that end, we give you an option to come in here and add in your own quote, just in case you find that this isn't a good cost for the anchor bolts in your area. You can add in a quote that might get you a little bit closer to your area, where you can put in your unit cost, and then put in the vendor who provided you with that unit cost as well. This becomes extremely handy as well, because now we can go through and see who's providing us with our best pricing information for everything, and we can set expirations so that I can get reminders regarding the pricing information and what I need to send off and get updated pricing for from Abernathy Brothers when the time comes. And these expiration dates are going to help us with that by highlighting the item in red or in pink whenever these expire. So keep an eye out for any of those that show up in the pink here, because if they are, that means that you need to do some updates to your pricing information or an update to the RS Means cost book as a whole. I know some of you guys viewing with us today are probably going to see a lot of these that need to be updated. So go under the Help menu in ConstructionSuite and check for the additional content. That might provide some additional clues for you guys there to help out as well. So there's a couple of more questions here. Let's see if we can take a look through. When you get to inserting the price, can you insert columns for each contractor's price as a comparison? There's a couple of different ways that I would recommend comparing prices, but typically what we do with ConstructionSuite is the cost book would be used mostly for comparing the prices, and along those lines as well, we also have an option under the Tools menu for just setting the lowest price as the default price that we're going to use for most of these items, and you can always change that out later. But that might actually require a little bit of one-on-one time as well, so if you'd like to explore that one in more detail, we'll talk about that in a little bit. Next one down though, next question, can we use, let me read that one again, it might be a little bit weird on the wording. Basically the question is, can we just use the material costs and not the labor costs when using RS Means items? And absolutely, you can. And that's another great question too, because RS Means breaks up their costs or their quotes into material quotes and labor quotes. And they do this individually because a lot of our clients will go through and they'll just use the materials from RS Means, and then they'll figure out how many man hours they think it's going to take for their guys to do this, and then you could just include a line item like foundation labor and say it's going to be at $25 an hour, it's going to take about 100 man hours to complete the foundation for this, or whatever it might be. So in that case, we could come under foundation labor and say 100 man hours at $25 an hour. And there you go. But keep in mind now that this is labor. And right now my total price is showing me that it's $2,500. But I know that the classification markups should be set. So let's go back up at this point to the estimating tab, and let's just verify that our classification markups are set, which they're not. I'm using a different template now, so we need to update these pricing information. So let's put in our updated labor burden. For me, the material markup usually includes things like waste or delivery fees or freight or storage. Subcontractor markups as well, there's always fees associated with them too. So we'll put those in, and now it's going to set those dollar markups by default. If you'll remember in the template, we also talked about doing this just before going to the company overhead margin. So let's take that next step as well. We're putting together some of the pricing information. We just set the dollar markups or the line item markups. So once again, we need to jump to the end of the estimate and set our company overhead margin as well. Now again, previously we were using 15% company overhead, 15% profit, and a 5% contingency reserve. These are good numbers and I like to make money, so let's go ahead and continue using those. And now you'll see that my overall contract value has gone up to $682,000 based on all of these markups and covering all of the costs and everything like that. So again, this is just going to be going through and setting some of the pricing information for us, both in footers in the foundation category, and as you step through, we can update some of the pricing information throughout other sections as well. Step through foundation materials and then concrete slab and concrete materials. Maybe from here we can go on to the framing category and make sure that our framing pricing information is accurate. So we've got a lump sum value for framing labor. It's probably going to be a subcontractor quote. Then we've got floor systems, materials, and so on. Again, there's a lot of items that you'll see as we navigate through this estimate as well that I didn't end up using on this particular job. Maybe some of them are going to be duplicates, or I've added in steel studs as well as just the regular studs, just in case we want to use those for any individual jobs. But in this case, I'm not. So once again, from here I'm going to go up to the View menu, and I'm going to hide all these unused sections because we're pretty comfortable now with where the estimate stands. For this particular job that we're looking at for my colleague Kyle Booth, I think just under $700,000 is a pretty fair target since he has a bottomless pit of money. And from here, we can just continue moving on then into the reporting phase. So again, adjust your pricing information, then double check to make sure that your markups are in place, double check to make sure that your company overhead margin is correct, then save the estimate, and then we can take a look under the Reporting tab. Now as you go through ConstructionSuite and you're working with the estimates, you're setting up all your pricing information, there's going to be three primary numbers that you're going to be dealing with here. We've got the estimate total, and that's from the estimate column. That's our extended cost, doesn't include tax, doesn't include any kind of markups or anything like that. From there we can add in the taxing information to show us the total cost. This is the total cost to me, or what I might expect to spend on this particular job. And then there's the total price, or what we're going to be charging the client. Now these two numbers don't always show up the exact same way, obviously, because my total price should always be higher than my total cost. I always need to make money. But we do want to make sure that as you're generating some of the reports for your clients, that you can provide the numbers that they want to see without having to explain how much you guys charge or anything like that as well. We also offer a variety of different types of reports, so sometimes for your reports you might want to pull out just the total cost and ignore any of the markups or the company overhead margin or anything like that. And you'll see this is pretty common with a lot of the vendor reports that you guys might be generating, like materials lists or purchase orders that you're going to send off to your vendors. to get filled, or the subcontractor contract that you're sending off to your subcontractors, we don't want to include our markup on those, so by default that's not going to be included as part of these reports. Now on the flip side, some of the customer reports that we're going to be generating, like this project totals or an allowance report, or the most important, which you'll find under the proposal section here, these do need to include all of the markups. And for most of these, I don't want to show them a breakdown for my individual units or the markup totals or anything like that. I just want to have like one big number and give them a breakdown of all of the components that are going to be included in this one big number, but not the cost for each of those components. So let's take a moment and look through the proposal wizard and figure out which set of settings we need to use in order to accomplish that goal. Now to begin with, when you first open the proposal wizard, it's going to give you two options. We're either working on a residential project right now or a commercial project. So you'll select the setting types that we're going to be using from here. In my case, this is going to be residential. So we'll click Next. Next, we need to make sure that there's going to be a contact and a project associated with this. Now, I can see that the project has already been sent, but when I created the project, I didn't actually assign the contact to it, mostly because I'm not working directly with Kyle. I'm going to be working through Kyle's rep, who is Alice Gorey, so let's select Alice from the list here. And now her information will populate in the contract as well. Now it's also a good idea to make sure that you include the options here for your letterhead if you'd like the letterhead to be generated in there automatically. If you want to edit the letterhead, there's a link for it right here that you can click to swap out the image. Now on the next page, you've got one of 6 different template types to pick from. The little image that it includes for these 6 different template types is going to give you a rough idea of what the template looks like prior to you going in and adjusting it. So for this first option, for example, that I use for most of my new construction, the header information that we have up here, it's just going to say proposal at the top, and then it's going to give me a little banner, a little bar across here. Then it's going to give me a date, and then it's going to give me some headings. The first heading is going to be for the customer, I believe, and then this is going to be all the customer information. For the project, maybe next, and then that'll be project information, and then from the contractor, and here's all of my information. Then it'll start to give me a little bit of details about the project beneath this, and this is going to be a rough idea of the layout. You can see that these are going to have a slightly different layout for them, for the information at the top. For example, this one is going to say customer and project, and then this is my contact information beneath it. This one breaks it all out into a more elaborate table. And all of this is completely customizable as well. These are just the starting points, but if you'd like, you can click on Edit Template to adjust those layouts, and we'll talk about that here in just a moment. But for now, I'm just going to use my first template here, and let's click Next. This is the beginnings for the information that's pulling in for your project as well. So, as we mentioned earlier, there's an area where you can put in a general scope of work and special conditions. I'm going to click Next at this point, get into the base price information. Some of those dimensions, which I don't particularly need on this job, but then we get into the real meat of the proposal. So this screen is pretty important in that here is where I get to select how much detail I'm going to be sharing with the client and what I want them to see and what I want them to get involved with as well. So with that being said, if we read through these options, you'll see some of the sections in here like including in total cost. If I want to show my client some kind of pricing information, we got a couple of different options for what's included in that price. And I want to make sure that the number is accurate, so I'm just going to include everything in there. I also want to include the company overhead and margin, but I don't want them to see this $240 or $240,000 figure. So instead, I'm going to prorate that into each of my categories so that each of my categories is proportionally higher. So it's going to show the right overall value, and we'll have the right contract value at the end as well. So you'll start to get some of that information in there as well. Some notes, we've got some other options down here as well, like including the line items or hiding subtotals. This one is particularly useful for me because I'm going to, in this particular job, I'm going to show them the category totals, but I don't want them to see subcategory totals. So I'd want them to know how much they're going to be spending on framing, but I don't want them to know how much is going to be done on framing labor or framing floor system materials or anything like that. They'll start to pick apart my prices, and I'm not interested in that, so we'll just click Finish. and it'll give me the proposal given the options that I selected. And there it is. So we've got a letterhead here. There's the image that we're going to use for that, and here's some of the auto-populating information that we have for it as well. This is my cover sheet for the proposal, and you can see some of the details for the project address, my company's address information. After the cover sheet, though, we've got the real details for the project. There's between the owner and the contractor for the project. Looks like I was a little off on those, but you'll see the information here. The total base price is the first number that I want them to pay attention to, perhaps. So you'll see that. Oh, it looks like I flipped those around. Hiding the subtotals just got rid of the planning category total. But that's not a problem. So there's the grand total for the job here at the top. As you scroll through and look at some of the details here as well, it'll show you pricing information and content and notes based on the selections that we made in the proposal. Now again, I realized in going through that proposal that some of the options that I selected don't really give me the results that I was hoping for. Maybe I didn't want to share with them any of the pricing information. I just want to show at the top that we have a total base price, and then beneath this we'll say planning, design services, permits, and some notes for permits, and then so on. Basically just a listing of everything that's included, but no sub prices here. So if that's the case, we can always just open up the estimate section again, hop back into the proposal wizard, and it's going to remember all of the settings that we used the last time. So this time, as we go through, you'll see everything is pretty much going to be the same. Same selections, same options picked, same checkboxes. And then here, I can just turn off the pricing information so that my clients don't get subtotals this time around. Now, there's nothing to say that you can't have a couple of different copies of the proposals either, so if the first one that you guys generate doesn't look exactly the way you like, no problem. Go through and generate a second one. When you get the content that you guys are comfortable with, maybe this is the sweet spot for you and you hit the right one, then you can always save this one as the primary proposal and then just close out of everything else. There's also going to be some additional options in here too, like if the spacing was a little bit weird, as you guys saw me doing earlier, maybe I just had the letterhead that was too large, or here I would prefer not to have the category split up on two different pages. We can go through and remove some of the spacing to get it into the right place. And you can make some adjustments to this and treat this just like you might treat a document that you guys had worked on in Microsoft Word. Ultimately, you'll have a lot of the same options as you're working through it. For example, looks like I've got a typo here, so I'm going to right click on that and switch it over to shingles. So we've got specs note, dimensional fiberglass shingles, and shadow line and ridge vents. Some of these things don't make a whole lot of sense to me, but maybe there's some text in here that we want to delete. That's easy enough to do. So you can do things like that as you're cleaning it up. You can also go back into the notes and touch these things up in the estimate as well if you find that you're going through and making the same changes over and over again. Or go back into the templates as well. So for the templates themselves, we'll dive into those in a moment, but just as you're going through here for the proposals, make sure that the content and everything looks the way you guys are comfortable. Once you have it finished, and you guys get down to the bottom, and you'll notice that there is an acceptance of agreement section here as well. Once you're finished and you're comfortable and you have this saved, then there's a couple of options on how to get it into the hands of the client. From here, you can go to the File tab and print out this document if you'd like. You can also export it into a PDF or a Word document or anything like that if you wanted to send it off through Outlook or another program or application like that. On the flip side, you can actually come to the page layout section and email it directly to the client from OnPoint as an attachment. You can do that here. And then add in your signature line or something along those lines as well. Or, and my personal favorite, you can come back to the File menu and just save it directly to ConstructionOnline. Now, for those of you who are using ConstructionOnline, you guys might know that there is no project limits or anything like that to your ConstructionOnline accounts. If you have the ConstructionOnline account set up, it's my personal hope that you would host everything, every project, every potential project or opportunity should be available to you guys on ConstructionOnline. And saving the proposal to ConstructionOnline just means that that's going to be available to your clients whenever they might want to go back in and review it. The reason I'm such a huge fan of this is I have found, through working with a lot of my clients here recently, that the ConstructionOnline as part of the sales package has increased the number of sales that they're able to close on. In some cases, it's given them half again as many projects to work on. So if you guys have the time for that and you want a 50% increase on jobs, try it out for a little while. See if you guys are comfortable with it. I think that you'll find, especially for your millennial clients, that a lot of them respond well to it. So again, this is just one of the ways that you can share that, and we'll talk about how to set up a lot of these projects on ConstructionOnline on Friday as we dive into the ConstructionOnline specific tools. But again, there's just a few options for you guys here. You can print it, you can export it into a PDF or Word document to send in your old email files system. You can email it directly through the page layout tab as an attachment, or you can just come to the file menu and just upload it directly to ConstructionOnline to send out to them as well. So several different options for you guys to work with, and if you would like to generate some additional reports, once again you can just come back into the estimate for the project, come back to the reports tab, and then we can add in some additional content for these as well. Under project management, these additional reports might include things like a classification report or a labor report. If you guys wanted to pull out everything that we have assigned to the classification labor, then you guys can use this labor report to pull out the number of man hours that you guys are projecting for the job, and it's a wonderful tool for that. You can also come into the project management section and say, pull out all of the allowances that we've set up, just in case you guys want to go through and create a selection checklist for your client. It's a good tool for that as well. Under the vendor reports, again, just touching back to these earlier, there's things like material lists that you can extract from here, or a purchase order. Subcontractor contracts as well. And as you go through and you open up some of these reports and take a look at the information that they're going to provide, you may notice that there's some additional selections or filter points for these as well. Filtering by classification is pretty common throughout most of these reports. So remember to set the classification. It's going to be useful, so definitely get that done. There's another option here, though, to filter by resource. Now, the resources that we have in ConstructionSuite are all going to be coming from your contacts list. And that contacts list, as we talked about yesterday, should include vendors and suppliers, subcontractors that you guys are working with, and everybody else. And if you open up the resource column in the estimate and assign those resources, then this is a really, really nice way to take a massive estimate and generate all the different subcontractor contracts that you need all at once, just by creating separate reports for each of the resources that we have in the estimate. So this is a tremendous time saver, and let's pause for a moment and take a look at how to assign those resources so that you can take advantage of this option. So we're back to the estimate itself in ConstructionSuite, and in order to assign resources, you'll need to be in one of the category sheets to open up the resource column in the estimate. So any of the category sheets will do. So just click down into one of the tabs for a category that you'd like to work on. And to open up the resource column, you'll need to right-click on any of the column headers up here at the top, and then select Show Hide Columns. Now again, write this one down if you guys don't already know this or if you're not familiar with this, because going into the Show Hide Columns section is the easiest way to open up or hide some of the extra columns that I've got available right now. So we're not working with invoiced amounts or any of these custom columns, so we can scroll down to the bottom of the list and turn off the custom columns and uncheck the option for the invoiced amounts. That'll come up tomorrow at least. But instead I want to turn on some of these additional columns that we need to access, like resources. Or for some of you guys doing commercial projects, maybe you guys need to take a look at the phases column. For remodeling projects, a lot of you guys might need to use the room column. So these are all going to be handy ones to have, and checking the box here will make the column available to us when we click OK. And there's my resource, there's my phase, and there's my room. Now resource is very straightforward. When you click into this column, it gives you the list of all the contacts that you guys have available. Now from here you can pick using the alphabetical listing. It's got a little Rolodex option at the top, so if we needed to add in neighbors and associates, maybe we can come over to the ends, and there's neighbors and associates, and then we can check the box for them and click OK. You can also come in here and add in a couple of different individuals. There's no limit really to the number of resources that you assign to a specific section, so check everybody that needs to be included and click OK. If you can't remember exactly who it is that you're looking for, you could instead flip over to the Search tab and type in the name, or what you might remember from them. Could be a phone number, could be part of an address, could be the primary contact. Maybe his name is John, so you got to go search for John, or something like that. But this just allows you to search through an expansive list to find the right person rather than trying to go through the Rolodex as well. We also talked about grouping a lot of the contacts yesterday, taking those contacts and grouping them into small subsections. So if we're looking at fireplaces and trim, and I wanted to look through and find maybe just a general subcontractor, we can expand out the subcontractors section and pull from this area one of the guys that might be doing the work for us on the fireplace and trim installation. Now again, the nice thing about this is when you assign the resources and then save the estimate, this is now going to be available to you as you go through and you generate those reports like the subcontractor contract or the bid proposal packages. And you'll actually see, in this case, Doug showing up in the list right there. So I could generate a report just for Doug if I wanted, and include whatever information from the estimate that I need, like the description, perhaps the notes or something like that if we wanted to include line item notes. We can even change some of the color coding around in there as well, just to add a little bit more pop to the report. But once you generate it, it may look something about like this. Now don't forget, you can always come through here and set these up so that the formatting on them is the way you like it. In my case though, I've noticed that there's some information in here that I would need to delete, and it's pretty common for me to delete these particular sections. So rather than going through and deleting these rows from the table every single time I generate the report, we can actually come back to the estimate, pull open the form for the report, and in this case I'm going to use the edit template link, which is going to be present on every single one of these forms when you're generating reports. Doesn't matter which report you're trying to generate. It could be under the vendor's reports, it could be the subcontractor reports. For customers, it could be one of the change orders that you guys are generating, or under project management, it could be something like the labor report that we talked about. Even under financials, there's an estimate versus actuals report. It too has the edit template link, and if you edit the template, it'll pop up the message alerting you that this is going to be the master template that you guys are making adjustments to. And only your ConstructionSuite administrators will be able to come in here and do this. But from here, you can remove all of this excess information that you don't need and you end up removing every single time. So do that. Save the template. There's a little save button up here in the top left corner, or under the file menu, just click save. And you'll have fixed that particular piece to this template so that you don't have to make that change again in the future. So again, making the adjustments to the template should be a pretty straightforward process. If you guys have some additional information that you guys want to include, or you would like to change out maybe some of the letterheads or add an image, perhaps, most of this you can do through the insert menu. We've got some areas where you can insert pictures or screenshots. You can put in hyperlinks, headers and footers, all of this under the insert menu in OnPoint. And you can add in some additional fields and special characters as well. Maybe out to the right hand side we've got trademarks and copyrights that you guys need to include, or something like that. But again, make the changes to the template that you like, save this as the master template, and then close it out so that your future reports will all use that new template as the guideline for them. So go through and take those steps and you'll be setting up everything that you need, and it'll all be available to you guys there. Now these are the reports, again, that are going to be available to you guys in ConstructionSuite. Different versions of the product are going to have different reports that are going to be available to them. For example, in the standard, the Builder Remodeler package, or the light versions of ConstructionSuite, you'll have most of these, but since it doesn't have access to very many of the financial reports should be disabled in those versions. As you guys move up to Pro and Contractor and above, that includes the first financial integration, so you'll start to see these become available to you guys there. And as you start to step up to things like the corporate or Catalyst versions of ConstructionSuite and above, there's going to be some additional reports that are going to be showing up, and then some additional options that are going to be available through the QuickBooks integration, like the application for payment, and for Premier and Catalyst and above, the WIP report as well, which we'll talk about populating tomorrow as we start to explore the QuickBooks integration. For now, though, that's going to cover most of the reports. And as you go through and make the adjustments to the reports, or you run the reports and the estimates are all going to show up back here in ConstructionSuite, either under the Recent Files tab, there they are, or if you come over to the Project Files, you'll actually see most of those available to you guys here as well. So lots of different content and lots of different options to be available to you guys here. And if you need to add in additional information, just like we talked about yesterday, you can always create more reports and save them in here, or you can drag and drop documents and content in there as well. Now for me, I'm finished with most of these, so let's go ahead and save and close these documents. And let's take a brief moment to take a look at generating some contracts for this as well. Now keep in mind, guys, that we're starting to get close to the time too. We'll still give you a little bit of time afterwards for questions if you guys have any, but feel free to shoot those over to me now if you have them. It's going to take just a moment to get into the contract section, so type them if you got them. But for now, let's go back to the project overview, because I'd like these to be pretty familiar to you guys. So here we are on the project overview, where we've got some of the estimate details, some of the files that we've worked on, and some of the additional content for the projects as well. But if you'll go over to the navigation panel on the left-hand side, there's a section just above projects marked Contracts and Docs. And it's from within this section that you'll actually see all of the different contract templates that we'll have available to us. So in Contracts and Docs, there's two tabs up at the top, New and Recent, which is going to show us just a couple of quick access buttons here and all of the reports and proposals that we've just finished making. It's also going to take us to the Document Templates, which is the other tab, and this is where you'll go to get into a lot of our boilerplate information for fixed fee contracts and cost plus contracts. You can expand the contract section to get into those contracts here. You'll also have a section here for design build contracts, or construction management documentation if you guys need those. For any of you who are working on some of the projects and you guys need something for remediation or anything like that, mold disclosure agreements or lead paint or anything like that, there's several different conditions and addenda that can be printed out and attached to any of the contracts that you guys generate. And there's additional content in here as well. Draw requests and lien forms, there's real estate documents and remodeling contracts, even 65-ish contract and document templates here as well. So plenty of content for you guys to work with and gather up. And just like before, all of this information is going to be modifiable if you right-click on any of these contracts or documents and select the Edit option. So let's go take a look at the fixed fee contract. Right-click and go to Edit, and you can make changes to the contract, changing out the verbiage or adding in your own letterheads or footers or anything like that that you guys would like. You'll also have an option from here as well to export, once again, under the File menu, you can export this as a Word document just in case you want to send this to your legal team and have them go through and just review the content in this particular contract to make sure that it's going to be completely valid in your local area. You'll find that these contracts are going to be legally binding for most of the United States and Canada, but and Australia for that matter. But I find that it's always a good idea to just go through and double check with them just in case there's something to your local principality or your local area that you guys need to keep in, that you need to add in there for any reason. Or if you're in California, as we talked about yesterday, there's an entire California content package that you can also download that includes all of the home improvement documentation instead of remodeling projects and things like that. So again, right-click to edit the templates. If you guys need to come into these and maybe change some of the text, and then you can save them. Or if you just want to use this contract on a job, all you need to do is double-click on the contract, and it'll ask you where to assign this particular contract. This should be the booth residence. There we go. And then it'll verify the project and the client information again, the contact information. So once again, this was supposed to be Alice Gorey. And there we go. Now again, in this case, I forgot to check the box for the letterhead. So let's come back up to the Insert menu and just add that letterhead in. And there we go. We're all set. And then from here, since it is a contract, I'll want to make sure that we navigate through the rest of this document and clean up any of the additional information that's in here that might not need to be. Or the blue text is designed to draw my attention to the additional areas where I need to update some of the information for this particular contract to be binding. For example, the owner agrees to purchase and the contractor agrees to construct the above mentioned structure and fixtures attached thereto in maybe Auburn County, Alabama. Something like that. Maybe that's going to be a requirement of the contract, so I'll want to replace that blue text with the text that should belong there, and you'll see this throughout. This one is actually, the month, day, year is actually the contract start date, not the date of the contract itself. So this we would need to put in for the start date, project shall begin, so on and so forth. So keep an eye out for this blue text as well. It's designed to draw your attention to it and make sure that you update the contracts accordingly. And then, same as before, we need to save the contract. And from here we can go to the File menu and upload it to ConstructionOnline. We can print it out and hand it off to the client from there. We can export it as a PDF or a Word document to email to the client through something like Outlook, or we can come to the page layout and email it directly from OnPoint as well. So plenty of different options on how to get the information out there. And this is just one of the many contracts that's available. And again, they're all customizable and adjustable. And if you guys are interested in pulling in your own contracts, give us a call. There's a few quick and easy steps to get that done as well. But for now, it looks like we're about out of time. But I think that this is a good stopping point as well. We've covered quite a bit today. And tomorrow we're going to expand on some of the options for estimating as we take a look at how this information from the estimates are going to transfer over to QuickBooks. By creating new customer jobs in QuickBooks, we'll be creating estimates, invoices, change orders, credit memos, purchase orders using those resources that we've assigned. And we'll be pulling a lot of that information back again as well to populate the various different sections. Now, for now, though, I do want to thank you guys for joining us. Don't forget, we will stick around for a little while still to answer any additional questions, and it looks like we've got a few. But for now, and for those of you who need to get back to work, I want to thank you again for joining me. Once again, this is Ian here with UDA Technologies, and this has been our estimating and reporting webinar. And if you have any follow-up questions or you'd like to reach out to us in any way, shape, or form, keep in mind that you can always open up your ConstructionSuite software, take a look up at the Help menu, and go to Contact Information, and from here you'll have our US and international phone numbers, email addresses, and several other means to get in touch with us as well. Feel free to take a look through here and reach out to us. I'd love to speak with you guys again. For now, though, I'll let you loose back onto the jobs and whatever else you guys need to get done. Thank you once again for joining me, guys, and I hope you have a great night. We'll see you tomorrow.